Hey there neighbors, Kevin here with eTrailer, and today we're going to be taking a look at Onan Cummins line of RV generators. And I have a couple of different options out here for you today that we're going to be taking a look at, but for the most part, a lot of this is going to be mostly just a replacement of one that you already currently have in your motorhome or your trailer. Now, in some cases, there are going to be trailers that are prepped for it, but just didn't have it just because the manufacturer didn't add that in. So in those cases, this would also be a great option for you. Now, if this is a replacement, it's going to be pretty simple to just pick out an exact match for the generator that you currently have. If you are wanting to upgrade and go with a larger wattage, then that's where you're going to probably have a little bit more involvement in figuring out what's actually going to fit, so size-wise, and then also just making sure that those connections are going to be in the same spot, so that way you're not having to run new lines or add your exhaust into a different spot and maybe make a bunch of different modifications to your trailer or motorhome. Now, if you are adding this in one that's just prepped or you are getting the full install, there are a lot of considerations to take into account, and the first one being your fuel type. So if this is going into a trailer, you most likely are only going to have propane on there. You typically aren't going to have a gasoline or diesel tank already installed on your trailer unless you possibly have a toy hauler, which in some cases those will have a gas tank in the back toy hauler section, so that way you can fill up your toys when you're out and about. Now, if you have a motorhome, that's where you're probably looking at either the gasoline or the diesel, and these are going to tie into your motorhome's gasoline or diesel tanks, so you'll be pulling directly from that. Now, there is a safety feature in there, so that way it's not going to overdo it and drain your tank, so then you're not stranded when you're out in your remote location. Now, once you figure out what your fuel source is going to be, the next step is going to be figuring out how much wattage you need. And the sizing on that wattage is also going to determine what amperage circuit breakers you're going to have and just how many you will. So as you start increasing in that wattage, you're now going to have larger amperage circuit breakers, and you can have more than one. So if you're under 5,500 running watts, then you will only have one circuit breaker, and that's pretty much going to be a 30 amp circuit breaker. Once you start getting into those higher levels, that's where you're going to start running into models that'll have either two 30 amp circuit breakers or 130 and 120 amp. And that's super important because that's how much power we're going to have to actually run all of our equipment in our motorhome or our trailer. So you want to make sure that you're actually getting exactly what you need and not going to be having an issue where now I have to turn off certain appliances just to make sure that I don't overload the circuit and I can actually power everything I need to. So taking a closer look, right next to our start and prime button, we have our circuit breakers. So you can see it's set for 30 amps on this, and we have two of them right here. So we know that we can easily power two AC units on our RV. Now, one other factor that might be important for you is whether or not your generator has a built-in inverter, and there are a few of the options that are going to come with that included in it. And what that's going to do is provide a nice, stable power source for your sensitive electronics, which is going to be your cell phones, your laptops, and your TVs. Typically, when you're camping, you just leave that TV plugged right into the outlet, so you might not have the best surge protection for it, so making sure that your power source, which in our case would be the generator, is going to provide that stable power so that we don't potentially damage our electronics. Now, one of the biggest features with Onan Cummins line of generators is that they have a lot of sound deadening built into it so that you're not disturbing others around you and you're not losing sleep when you have your generator running overnight. If we look at the back side of our panel, you can see how thick that sound deadening is on there and the heat shield that it has on here to kind of prevent that heat from causing any other issues with anything that's in the compartment it's stored in. Now, the muffler is also going to have that same sound deadening, so that way it's much quieter, and it's going to be within the National Park Service's requirement of 60 decibels at 50 feet. So that way, like I said, you're not disturbing anyone else, and you can still have a nice conversation without having to yell. Now, in most of these setups, you are going to have a remote start, so you will have some wiring that's ran into typically a panel somewhere inside your trailer with the same kind of primer and start button on it, so that way you can run the generator while you're still inside. But if for some reason you have some kind of issue with that panel, or maybe you just didn't have that ran for you and you're maybe doing a new setup, you can still come right out to the unit and pop off the door, and you can get right to this and start it up and be ready to go. Now, as with any other kind of engine, there's going to be some maintenance required so that you can make sure that you're getting the full life out of the product. And Onan does a really great job of giving you the support that you need to make sure that you know exactly what you should be doing. If you look in your instruction manual, there's a really big chart that lists out every single model, and it has each thing that you should do at each amount of hours used. And they also got a little portion of that as well right here in this service information section on our actual generator. And if we look at that, that's going to tell us when we should be checking our oil level, when we should be replacing our oil filter and our air filter. And then it also tells us the part numbers for those, so that way we're not looking for anything. We know exactly what we need to get, and we can purchase it and make sure that we're all ready to go here. Now, there will be oil that needs to be changed in this, especially after a little bit of use. So you'll use this and then need to replace the oil. And then from there, it'd be more of a routine maintenance based on the amount of hours you're using. But when it comes to engines, especially a diesel one, you should definitely run it routinely. Even if you're not really using it to use it, at least just turn it on and run it for a little bit. That way it can kind of work through some of that fluid and there's nothing that's going to get stagnant inside of it. If you are putting away your motorhome or trailer for storage, you are going to make sure that you either drain out the fuel or put in some stabilizers so that way you don't have that sit there, like I said, and get stagnant and then potentially damage the engine, and then now you're looking at a much larger repair. Now, one other thing you should take into consideration is going to be your elevation. So with any engine, it's burning a sort of fuel, and the amount of air to fuel ratio, it can kind of change as you start getting higher and higher above the sea level. So for every 1,000 feet above sea level, you're looking at a 3.5% drop in efficiency. So you will want to take that into account. If you are going higher and higher, maybe you're going to Denver and you're going to be really high up in that elevation, now your generator's not going to perform as well as it would if you were down at sea level. So just one little piece of food for thought, just to make sure that you really understand exactly what you're getting with your generator. But now that we've kind of gone over some of the finer details here, why don't we actually go see one in use. Now we have our motorhome lifted up so you guys can get a better picture of what is going on under our generator. So first thing you can really see here is our exhaust. So our exhaust is running down and just shooting to the back of the motorhome. It's a good idea to get under here every once in a while and check, just make sure that you don't have any kind of exhaust leak or any kind of fuel leak. And right next to our exhaust here is going to be a couple other attachment points. So we have our power and our ground right next to it, and then further up towards the front we have our fuel supply and our fuel return. And that's where you're really going to be looking for those leaks, making sure that there's no fuel leaking out anywhere, because you don't want to start the generator and obviously have any kind of issue or just have fuel leaking out, because this is tied into the gas tank for your motorhome, so you don't want to just continuously be losing fuel. On this little hatch right here, we'll pinch these two together and drop that down, and then inside of there you can see our fuel filters. Looks like we have two of them right here, one for the supply and one for the return. And then further up you can see this gray oil filter. So that's where you'd have to get into there and pop out your oil filter, get that replaced, and then our drain plug for our oil pan is right over here. So you can see the bolt tied right in, so we'd want to pop that out, drain out all of our old used up oil, and then the actual fill port is further up, so we can get back out from under here and take a look at that. But before we do want to point out one other thing, and that's going to be our air filter. So over on this side, it's kind of set up just like you would see on your lawnmower. You got a wing nut here, we'll just pop that off. Pop that cover out, you can see our air filter. So it's super easy design to get to it, and then you can clean it out or replace it as needed. So up top, close to our controls, you're going to have your inlet for your oil and for your coolant, and they even have a tag here telling you exactly which specific oil you should be using. Now that can differ depending on if it's colder or if it's warmer, so they do have a little bit of info on that in the owner's manual to tell you which type you should be using so you have the right viscosity for that temperature. And like I said, right behind the oil one we have our coolant, and you can kind of see too because the coolant reservoir is right here too. It's that clear plastic, and they've got a minimum and a maximum. We're just barely over the minimum here. So as you can see, they only have 18 hours and 7/10 of an hour actually ran on this motor. So they're just almost to that threshold at that 20-hour mark where they need to replace their oil, replace the oil filters, and do a little bit more pre-maintenance here just to get past the initial set up from the factory and make sure everything's going to be running properly. So probably the next trip that they go out, this is going to be one where they're going to want to run it probably a little bit beforehand, get all that maintenance done, so that way when they're out at their campsite, they're not having to do all this extra work or try and clean up an oil spill if they end up having a little bit drip out, because obviously you don't want to have that at your campground. All right, so we're outside now. We're going to go through our pre-check list, and we're actually going to turn on our generator. Now, in each one of these, you're going to have that quick start guide, and on page 2, it's going to have your pre-check list of every single thing you need to check, and it's even got a little box there for you. With how this is laminated, you could even throw this in somewhere. Maybe you get put a hole punch through it right on the corner and then zip tie it up somewhere inside here so that you always have it right next to it, so you can double check everything beforehand. And then you could use a dry erase marker to check off each one of those boxes to know that you did it every single time. So first step is going to be just double checking, making sure that our carbon monoxide detectors are actually functioning inside of our motorhome. We wouldn't want to have any exhaust leaking up into there and not have some way to detect it to make sure that we're staying safe. From there, we're going to be looking for any kind of fuel or exhaust leaks. So that's where you kind of look under, see if there's any kind of dark spots under your generator. Maybe you have a little bit of a fuel leak, maybe you have some oil that's leaking out, or you have a leak through your exhaust. Just a real quick once over would help you determine that. And then from there, we're going to be looking at how much clearance do we have? So this is like before when I was talking about don't put skirting under your motorhome or RV where it's going to block the airflow for our generator. So we have all this space right here. This all needs to be wide open with some easy access for airflow to go through so that our generator can actually breathe. After that, we want to make sure that we're turning off every large load that's inside of our RV, and that's going to be anything running on 110. So that's going to be your AC units. You don't want to have those running. You don't want to have your microwave running or any other thing that's going to have a pretty big power draw, because we don't want to put a huge load on our generator until it is actually fully running. When it first starts up, it's going to need a little bit of time, and you're going to hear it kind of drop down to where it idles normally, and that is where you want to be at before you start turning on those heavy loads. So maybe it's a hot day like it is right now, and you had both of your AC units running, or turned on at least on the inside, and then now you come out to start the generator up so you can actually run them. You don't want those both kicking on and trying to draw power from here at the same time. Especially with the specific model that we have, all it has is one circuit breaker on it rated for 35 amps. So if you have two AC units, you might want to cut it down to just one. If your two AC units can actually communicate with each other, then that would be the better of the two, because then it would tell one of them not to kick on at the same time that the other one was, so it wouldn't have as huge of a power draw all at once. But that gets real specific to your specific setup, so there's a lot more to that you'd have to check. From there, we're going to be checking our fluid levels. So obviously your fuel, but this is pulling from your actual fuel tank for your motorhome. If this was on an RV, you definitely want to make sure that you're checking your fuel tank, making sure that you have enough in there, because this will have a cutoff so that it doesn't completely drain your tank. From there, we also have our oil, our coolant. We want to double check those, make sure those are topped off to where they need to be. We don't want our generator to be too low or too high on that and then have some issues. And then from there, we are going to just check and fill the hydraulic pump, just depending on if your model has that or not. There will be an oil reservoir for that as well. So once all that's good, then we'll come over to our prime and start button here. So on the bottom of this button, it's got to stop, and we're going to sit there and we're going to hold that. And you'll hear a pump running, and that's just providing fuel into the carburetor. Once that is full enough and it's primed up, that's when we can go to actually start it. So I'm going to sit here, we'll hold this. The light is going to come on our button here for our switch. We'll run that for about 30 seconds. On diesel models, they say to run it for a full minute while you're starting to prime it. This has already ran a couple of times, so started right up. So now that it's running, we're gonna let it just run for 3 to 5 minutes, and you'll hear it start to drop back down. It'll idle a lot lower, and that's when you know that it is fully ready to go and you can go and turn on those loads inside of your trailer or your motorhome. All right, so we've let this run for a couple minutes. It's idled down to where it needs to be. We know that we're getting nice, steady current through here. The big thing I want to talk about now is just sound. So a little bit louder. If I was at a campsite with a bunch of other campers running, you'd probably hear a lot more noise from everyone's ACs kicking on and running. So this wouldn't be too above normal, but it is a little bit louder. Now there is a muffler built into it, so it is a lot quieter. It does meet the USDA standards for 60 decibels at 50 feet. But let's go inside too. Let's get an idea of how loud it's going to sound, because typically you're not going to be standing right next to the generator. So once we're over on the other side of the motorhome, it is a lot quieter. But let's see how it actually sounds when we're inside of our camper and see if this is going to be too disturbing to where you're not going to be able to sleep. So right now we're inside of our RV, and the generator is actually mounted up just below the bed here, just a little bit off to the back. And honestly, it is rumbling. You can definitely feel the vibration through the frame rails coming up throughout the motorhome here. But at the same time, it's quiet enough that you can hear me talk, and I'm not really talking super loud here. I mean, I'm having a normal conversation. All right, so I just turned the AC unit on. Completely drowned out the noise from our generator. Now, obviously, you can still, through your feet, feel the vibration through the floor, but like I said, just the air rush through all of our ductwork is going to drown that out, so be a lot more enjoyable. Now, typically when you have a generator installed on your RV, there's already going to be some sort of remote switch, so that way you're not having to get out of your RV every single time you want to go and start and stop it. Typically, it's usually right in the walkway when you first come in on motorhomes. On a fifth wheel or travel trailer where there's an onboard generator, typically that's going to be up a little bit more. Usually you'll have some sort of control panel that's going to have your black tank, your water heater, your gray tanks, all of that stuff all kind of combined into one single panel. And that's usually where they're going to mount that button. And you'll usually see something kind of like this switch right here where you can kind of press it back or forth, just like it is on the generator itself. Now this one right here specifically is a battery disconnect, so it's not exactly it, but just a little bit of a reference so that you can actually look for that when you are. All right, so here is our generator layout here on our control panel. Obviously, if your control panel is different, this is going to be a little bit different of a setup, but for the most part, it's pretty simple. Just sit there and hold start. You can see it's starting. And then this is the part where we'd want to wait just a little bit, let it fully kick on, get up to a safe and constant running speed, and then we could turn on our loads. So with this display, it also gives us a little bit more, showing us exactly how power's ran. So one of the things is you know, am I going to have to actually go into my panel and physically turn off circuit breakers so that I make sure I don't accidentally overload it? With this one, they probably have it all kind of set, since they have a transfer switch too, to only do a certain amount so that you're not overdoing it on there. That would be something I definitely want to check with the manufacturer first though, just to make sure I'm not potentially going to run into an issue where I overload that circuit and it pops the breaker on our unit. But here you can see it's running up, it's hitting our transfer switch, so now it's not taking any power from shore power. It comes over to our breaker box and then it's running out. So it looks like they have also charging the house battery as well. So that way, if your house battery was dead, you could run the generator and power. Maybe you have a electric jack system on your RV and you just are at too low of a voltage. Typically, especially if you have like the Lippert ground control, you need to have 12.73 volts. And a lot of the time we run into issues where we're just barely under that at like 12.4 volts and then it doesn't want to work. So you could easily just turn on your generator, power up the house battery enough to where it's ready to go, and then activate your landing gears. All right, now that we've kind of gone over some stuff though, we can just simply hit the stop button, immediately stops off, and we're all good to go. Well, that's going to do it for our look at the line of Onan Cummins RV generators. My name's Kevin, and I hope this helped you answer any questions you might have or help you kind of decide which one is going to be the right fit for your setup. If you still have any other questions or you still need help picking out the right one, please feel free to reach out to us via our Ask the Experts link, a comment on this video, or a phone call to our customer service department. We'd be happy to help you out on your journey.